Now, as we've just heard, the Foreign Affairs Minister Bob Carr has met Libya's Prime Minister and the Deputy Foreign Minister. And to tell us what came of the discussions, he joins us now from Algeria. Good morning. Thank you very much for your time, Senator Carr. How close is Melinda Taylor to being released?
I couldn't put time on it. I'm hopeful that after what I heard earlier today in Libya, that the government is wrapping up the investigation by its prosecutor. I'm confident that the Libyan government and even the authorities in Zintan are keen that the 4 detainees be released. And I'm quietly confident that with an appropriate form of words from the International Criminal Court, that they will respond sooner rather than later. So it's still a fragile position, but I feel reasonably hopeful that as the Libyans see it, it would be good to wrap this affair up with the release of the detainees.
So just tell us about this apology and the wording of it, and whether in fact the ICC has agreed to issue the statement.
Yeah, I can't wade through the whole territory of what was said when Melinda Taylor and colleagues were interviewing Mr Gaddafi in a cell in Zintan. Argument about papers being handed over and all the rest. But it's certainly true that the Libyan authorities, and not just the people in Zintan, form the view that something wrong was done, that there had been a breach of trust. I believe the ICC would have been protecting its employees, Melinda Taylor included, better if they had negotiated protocols and procedures with the Libyans before they allowed their people to go in. And I think if they acknowledged that in a brisk way, a workmanlike way in a statement, they'll clear the air and make it possible not only for the central government in Libya, but for those in Zintan enforcing its authority to move as well.
Up until now, what's been said is that the ICC, as a UN body, operates under diplomatic immunity in these countries. You're now saying that the ICC maybe has made mistakes. Does the ICC acknowledge that?
I spoke to Judge Song of the ICC on my way from Tripoli to the airport, and I put to him very strongly that given the widely and firmly held view in Libya about this, given the confusion about procedures and protocols, it would do no harm to the status and authority of the ICC to apologise to the Libyan authorities and to concede that things might have been prepared for in a more thoroughgoing way. If that's said, I think that the Libyans are deeply concerned about continuing threats to their security. The Prime Minister and the Deputy Foreign Minister made reference, when they were talking to me, to Gaddafi forces just beyond the borders, Gaddafi forces with the capacity to move anywhere along 4,000 kilometres of land border that Libya shares with other countries. They see this as a real threat. There's a lot of focus on the wreckage of the country after the years of the Gaddafi dictatorship. So there's a lot of swirling resentment and hatred focused on the Gaddafi in prison. As a result, extreme sensitivities in this affair, and I think they've got to be dealt with. We're prepared, and I offer this to the ICC, and I offered it to the Prime Minister and to the Deputy Foreign Minister. We're prepared to be the brokers between the International Criminal Court and the Libyans. They recognise they've got to have a dialogue when this affair is settled, and I think Australia could play a role as good global citizen in facilitating it, and both of them are open to that suggestion.
You said that it could do no harm for the ICC to issue this apology. The ICC has come under huge criticism because it hasn't successfully prosecuted cases, and it's seen as somewhat a toothless tiger. So surely another diplomatic mistake on the part of the ICC will do the organisation harm.
I've got a different view. I think the ICC has demonstrated a pretty good record in recent cases. And I think, bear in mind, the ICC was set up to bring prosecutions in cases where a country was disinclined to do it or couldn't do it. This is very different. In Libya, you've got a government very keen to get on with the task of prosecuting someone for war crimes or crimes against humanity or genocide, one of the categories of serious crime on a mass scale.
But the rebels in Libya won't even hand over Saif al-Islam.
No, but that's because they want to prosecute him themselves. They want to carry out the prosecution. That's the difference. It's not a case that the ICC, such as the ICC has been involved with in the past, where the government holding the alleged war criminal has been reluctant or unable to carry out the prosecution. Here you've got the government that holds the alleged war criminal itching to get on with the prosecution, and that makes it different, and I think that means there can be fruitful cooperation. I don't see why, for example, the Libyans shouldn't be allowed to carry out this prosecution themselves in some sort of partnership with the ICC. It wouldn't be too hard to negotiate the terms and conditions by which the ICC assists, monitors, advises, consults with the Libyans while they carry it out. I'm not prescribing this, but I'm saying that there's plenty of ground for a fruitful dialogue between the two organisations. Following the release of the 4 detainees, Australia's prepared to set that up.
Senator Carr, you said ahead of this meeting that you had modest expectations of what would come of it, given that Libya had previously said it needed 45 days to complete this investigation. Your personal intervention has clearly made a significant difference. Should that have come sooner?
I might be mistaken about my reading of the situation, and I might be overlooking the difficulties the Libyan administration could face in implementing this. This has been gathering pace for about a week now, and no intervention by me would have been possible earlier. We needed the air to clear. We need to know where the authorities stood. But certainly, without raising the hopes of Jeff, Melinda's husband, or Janelle and John, her parents in Brisbane, I was reassured by the Prime Minister and his Deputy Foreign Minister talking about wrapping up the investigation soon. And if that's done with appropriate wording from the ICC, I think the goodwill being offered by the Libyans should be tested. And again, without raising hopes on too little evidence, too little information, too little encouragement, I'd like to think that goodwill might be flowing in the right direction.
Senator Carr, what contact have you had with Melinda Taylor's family since this meeting took place?
I spoke to, since the meeting took place, it was too late at night to bother John and Janelle in Brisbane. I'd spoken to them before I went to Libya, but I spoke to Jeff. I woke him up early. He lives in The Hague. I told him what I was going to be proposing after what I thought were very fruitful meetings with the Prime Minister and the Deputy, very promising meetings with the Prime Minister and the Deputy Foreign Minister. I told him the nature of the settlement that I was suggesting to both sides, and I think he was quietly encouraged.
And in terms of Australia's relationship with Libya, how much aid is Australia providing Libya, and are you happy that Libya is doing all it can in order to allow not just Melinda Taylor but the other ICC lawyers to leave as soon as possible?
Something in this affair has deeply stirred the Libyans, not just a militia group in Zintan, but serious people committed to democracy in the senior levels of the Transitional Council. We've got to acknowledge that. We've got to work with them. The people I met today are seriously committed to leading their country to a democratic future. The problems they face are huge. Here's a country that was debauched, devoured, divided, destroyed by decades of the worst kind of dictatorship. And then on top of that, they had their institutions and their infrastructure blown apart by months of revolutionary war. They've still got an armed militia. The Prime Minister I spoke to has got to deal with armed militia across his country. And I feel immensely sorry for them. We discussed whether Australia could help in a very specific form of aid, and that is that is giving them some capacity building assistance in putting together a judicial system. They've still got the old statutes of the Gaddafi regime. They've still got judicial figures from the Gaddafi regime. Here's a country that needs to rebuild its civil society and rebuild a judicial system. And that's something where I think we can help.
Bob Carr, we thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.